Greetings and welcome. We are in Senior AP English, and our objective now for the hour is to talk about the great Francis Bacon. Yesterday in my lecture, I spoke about the importance of understanding the Enlightenment as the, what's the word I used again? Differentiation of the value spheres. Francis Bacon plays an incredibly important role in beginning that movement towards the moving away of the three spheres of influence as we defined them yesterday in that differentiation of the value spheres, namely arts, morals, and science. Bacon. He is a fascinating cat. A few years ago, Stanford wanted to know, before Wishler and his IQ scale had been invented, who was the smartest person who ever lived. And so a group of Stanford grad students put together and wrote a software program where over a series of weeks, this program crunched numbers to try to come out with a possible IQ score for those who had lived before Wishler and his great IQ test. Number one was the great German writer Goethe, who we'll get to when we study Freud. I'm drawing a blank. Faust, sorry. F on my mind. And number two was actually Francis Bacon. So let's just say it out loud. This is one of the sharpest cats that ever lived. If you've looked at his biography, you know that, for example, by the age of 13, he's already got his PhD from Cambridge and a few other things like that. He speaks 7, 8 different languages. He was fluently reading and writing in Latin and Greek at an extremely young age. I mean, by the age of 7. And so he's exceptionally bright. He's a prodigy from a very young age. He will, if you look him up on Google or in a Webster's or whatever, he will often be referred to as a philosopher. In 1926, when the great Will Durant, I'm sometimes giving you titles that maybe you'll want to read after graduation. This is one of them. Will Durant published in 1926 what is arguably one of the single greatest anthologies of secondary philosophy, not primary text but secondary text, called Story of Philosophy. He gives an entire chapter in Story of Philosophy to Francis Bacon, which is quite remarkable to think of Francis Bacon as being one of the great philosophers. But truly, he's the great scientist. He's one of the first great scientists. Are you ready for this? The way he dies. One evening in the winter, he has dead chickens in his backyard. He's sticking them under the snow, going through a process of trying to study the notion of refrigeration. Because at this point, remember, we don't have refrigerators in houses. The only way meat can be saved is usually by packing it with salt. And so he's working with this idea. I can only imagine the next door neighbor, right? Maybe Edith with her hairs in rollers talking to her husband about there's Francis in the backyard doing weird things again. And there he is in the backyard. And then he's got dead chickens lined up into the house, then closer to the fire. And he's got his little clipboard, like scientists will, keeping notes about the decomposition of the meat. At some point in the evening, he begins to cough. And then he's in his bed. A few days later, he's dead. One of the smartest guys who ever lived died stuffing chickens with snow. And to help you with the mnemonic, if you need it, you'll always remember Francis Bacon by eggs and bacon. That's the really bad philosophic joke of today. The bacon goes with eggs. Yeah, I just thought. Eggs come from chickens. I thought. What makes bacon so interesting is that he... I'll do you for that. What makes bacon so interesting is that he invents, in many ways, the formal academic essay to record scientific findings. For those of you who want to curse my name or someone else's name every time you have to write an essay, the one you probably should curse is Francis Bacon. He actually invents the modern essay. In fact, if you'll think about it, we've not yet read an essay in this class together. Have you noticed this? We've read something that kind of looked like an essay in Donne's Meditation 17, No Man is an Island and Tyre the Main. But that's almost like prose poetry. Bacon writes essays, and they become very famous essays, none more famous than the one we will now study of studies. Now, we should point out, This is a guy that can go in a library and sit for 10 straight hours and study. He has that ability of focus. So when he writes an essay, it's going to be important for us on studying. It's going to be important for us that we pay attention to it. Now, just to pause for one more moment. As we now break under 50 school days remaining for ourselves as seniors in high school, I want to remind you why you are still here. I am pleased, for example, that by this point in your academic, intellectual learning curve, you know something now about Milton in Paradise Lost. You know something about Shakespeare. You know something, and the list could go on. Dante, etc. In a few moments, Bacon. And I'm pleased about that. But that is not why we're here. The reason we're here is to learn how to read. Okay? I'm using these texts. I could be doing other texts. We could be reading in history. We could be reading in science. We could be reading in mathematics. We could read in any number of other disciplines. We're just picking the humanities to read in, and I'm teaching you how to read. I will model again for you today the art of annotation. That will determine your success or failure at university. I could argue pretty much almost that alone. If you can read well on your own and annotate, you're going to do all right at the next level. If you can't, you're going to struggle. So I'm going to use today this essay of studies to try to, again, remind you of what it means to read, to annotate. And the place I'm going to go right away is to suggest that while you read external annotation, you want to be somehow drawing some kind of word pictures for yourself, some kind of graph, some kind of way to take notes. Now at this point, you need to be inventing ways to take your own notes so that as you read, you can internalize the material and hopefully have some kind of mnemonic memory tool that allows you to be able to do it. We will look at this classic essay in that way. All right? Now, with that in mind, let's make one other observation. For those of you that tried to pick this essay up and look at it, I've often had students that do this. Oh, sweet, finally a short essay. Yes, I'll fly through this one in no time at all. And then they got about 7 lines into this thing and went, whoa, 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 what am I reading? Remember the biography. That's where we always start when we read. We want to note this is a really bright cat. So it's altogether possible that right away he's going to be saying things that are going to challenge us, maybe even be a little bit over our heads. And for some of us, we'll admit this right away. This is a pretty difficult essay to kind of unpack, and that's what we'll be doing. So as we get ready to go now, we'll be working. I'll be on the whiteboard, and I'll demonstrate to you a way in which I recommend that you would be annotating this essay. For many, many years, when I lectured this as I have the 1010 course for the university, I always went to this essay early in the semester to explain to students what I meant when I used the term annotation. I will ask Mr. Sherman in his fine reading voice to be reading for us. And please know in advance, Mr. Sherman, that I will be interrupting you as we go. You will have a sheet of paper in front of you. Watch how I begin the process of annotating this essay so that I have a way to make it my own. That is to say, I can remember it. That's why I use the term mnemonic. Once I'm done, I want to be able to remember the essay on my own. See, if I wanted to be nasty as a 1020 prof, I would have simply told you to take out a blank sheet of paper at the beginning of the hour, and I would have started asking you questions about this essay. Detailed questions about this essay. And if for those of you who actually tried to read this essay, you would say, yeah, I don't think I could answer it very detailed. That's our challenge. Can I read this on my own, and can I figure out what it's about? Here we go. We begin with a title of studies. So we recognize right away that Bacon is going to be talking about this thing he'll call studies. We're going to obviously ask the question, what does he mean when he uses the term studies? Got me? All right, now we're ready to go. Mr. Sherman, go ahead and begin to read for us. Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability. And again, please pardon me as I interrupt. Go ahead.
Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability.
And notice right away, I'm going to recognize he's working in trinities, or threes. A tripartite first line. Studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability. And what I'm going to do on my papers, I'm actually going to write these 3, and then I'm going to recognize because their chief use in delight. Go ahead, Mr. Sherman.
Their chief use for delight is in privateness and retirement.
And what I understand he's doing right away, and the quicker that you can begin to do this kind of work, the better. So that you're able to say, oh, I get it. He's going to give me 3 things studies are good for, and then he's going to break down each one of those in detail for me. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put his words there, and then I'm going to try and figure out what he means in my own words. So he says, studies serve for delight, for ornament, and for ability. Their chief use in delight, and then he uses 2 words, as in what? Privateness and retiring. And then I'm going to draw a little line, because I'm going to go ahead then below this and put my own words there. I'm not going to Google this essay first. I want to actually figure out on my own what he's saying. What does it mean, studies serve for delight, as in privateness and retiring? What does that mean to you? Privateness means what? When I'm alone. Good, let's write that one down. When I'm alone. Studies are useful for when I'm alone. Keep going. What else? What does retiring mean? Now, I know what that means when I've worked at a place long enough and they give me a watch and say, you know, thanks, retire. But that's not this word. Maybe, yeah, say that out loud, Damiano.
Turning in.
That's what it really means. And you've maybe heard old farts say this. This is an old use of the word. I think I will retire for the evening means I'm going to my bedroom. I'm going alone. In other words, retiring here means when you are spending time alone. Bacon says studies are useful for when you're by yourself. It keeps you from being, right? A good read keeps you from being bored, if you will, right? Studies are useful to give you something to do, right, when you're by yourself. Next, studies in regards to ornament. Now, wait a minute. I understand this whole thing if I get a tree in Christmas time and I hang ornaments on it, but that's not this word, although it's the same word. What does it mean, ornaments? Does anyone know? Why do you hang an ornament on a tree? What does it do for the tree? It decorates it, doesn't it? And that's actually ultimately going to be our understanding. This whole notion of decorating, dressing up, we might say. But go ahead, Mr. Sherman, read it for us in regards to ornamentation. Go.
For ornament is in discourse.
As in discourse. Now, what is that all about? What does the word discourse mean? If Mr. Batson and I have a discourse, what does that mean? We're having conversation, right? Now, what does that mean? What does he mean when he says, studies allow us to have ornament in our discourse?
Sound smart.
Ah, this is great. Miss Eve says, what he's saying is that if you study, you can sound smart. Now, Bacon points out something I think quite remarkable, and we want to make this observation now together. The idea of ornamentation in discourse. I'm often asked by graduating seniors, what's the one thing that I'm missing as I get ready to go, that I still need to learn how to do? And I said years ago to my students, it's a blessing in many ways to grow up in a town of 5,000. It's also a curse. The blessings, I think, we're somewhat familiar with better now than we probably were when we were freshmen. But what is the greatest curse of growing up in a town of 5,000, in a high school of 400, where everyone knows everyone? And I say it this way. For the rest of your life, unless you decide to return back here, you will live in communities where you do not know anyone. Your ability to walk up to a complete, total stranger and say, hi, I'm Tim McGee, blah, 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 who are you? Shake their hand. Look them right in the eye. Some of you will have to admit, I can't remember the last time I had to do that. Every job I ever got in this town, it was because I knew somebody who knew somebody and I just showed up and they already knew me. When was the last time you walked up to somebody you did not know and you introduced yourself, not the other way around? For those of you that say, yeah, I don't do that because I'm a shy person, Bacon will say, it is time to wake up. This is called the real world, where you have to go out and get a job, for example. Now, many years ago, I should share with you a bit of my biography. I don't do a lot of this, but I was not raised in the United States for much of my life. When I finally did come to the United States, I realized right away Americans are very strange people. Strange in what way? Well, in a number of ways, but Americans are kind of strange in this regards. Americans assume things about people instinctively. So, for example, there's the guy who's going to hire you. He's doing that little thing with his pencil on the table, right? And then he looks up at you and he says, "What are your views about your salary?" Now, by the way, I'll tell you in advance, this is a setup question. When the potential boss starts raising the issue of salary, you don't really want to say too much because it's a setup. He wants to kind of hear that you're willing to take whatever he's there to offer. But what would it mean if you were to say back to him, "You know, I'm going to leave the issue of emolument to you"? Now, here's the problem with doing that for him. Because he's the one hiring you, he can't ask you what emolument means. Because the minute he asks you what emolument means, the power dynamic has changed. You know something he doesn't know. Right? So he's going to wait until you leave. He's going to take out his little dictionary and he's going to Google or look up emolument, realize that it means, it's another word for salary. He's going to immediately assume, wow, you must be really smart because you used a word he didn't know. See, this is a strange thing about Americans. Although you may have been sitting out in the foyer waiting for this interview, looked inside of a Reader's Digest for the first time, you know, those words, right? And for the first time saw that the word emolument meant salary and you used it for the very first time in your life. This is the point. Americans are like this. They will assume, whoa, vocabulary means smart. You must be smart. Therefore, I'm going to hire you. Very strange. Or how about this one? I learned this one very early on in my life as a young man coming back to the United States. Americans are very, very strange in this regards. How about this? I can say it this way. I'll demonstrate. If I begin to speak like this, you assume that I'm highly intelligent, even though the truth of the matter is I'm actually quite stupid. On the other hand, y'all hear me talking like this, y'all figure I'm about as dumb as a post somewhere out there outside of Lubbock, Texas or something like that. Y'all know what I mean? I might have a couple of PhDs. Y'all figure I'm as stupid as can be. Americans are strange in this regards. Strange in this regard. We make assumptions about people all the time. Can I make an observation that's not mine, it's Bacon's? If you live in a culture where people assume that you're really, really smart because you got a vocabulary, get a vocabulary. Hey, I used to talk about this great. Are you familiar with the car Porsche? It's a great sports car. It's, they used to make these awesome commercials. One of my favorite commercials of all time, where this well-dressed gentleman with the bow tie is driving in his beautiful Porsche car in the middle of nowhere, kind of like where we live. You know how they do that in the middle of nowhere, and there's this stoplight in the middle of nowhere. And he pulls up, this beautiful Chopin music is playing. He's all by himself. He's sitting there, and the light turns red, and he stops. Then all of a sudden on the music backtrack, there's this heavy metal Metallica music that comes on and pulls up next to him this Grand Am, car made by Chevrolet, the Grand Am that's parked right next to him, red light. And there's kids inside and there's smoke coming out the windows and the music's playing out. And they do like this, like they want to race with him, right? The light turns green, the tires, the whole screen goes smoked up. And then as the smoke goes down, the classical music comes back up. The Trans Am is gone, completely gone with the kids in it, gone. The gentleman in the Porsche engages and slowly pulls away. Nothing has been said in this commercial, right? And then all of a sudden, the screen goes black and up comes some words and it says, "The power is in knowing. You don't always have to use it. Porsche, there is no substitute." Right. See, that guy sitting in that Porsche knew he could dust completely these kids, right, in their car. He didn't have to use the power. He knew he had it. I always point this out because sometimes we as young scholars have a tendency to kind of learn things, and then we want to show people how smart we are. Do you know what I mean? So, for example, now we know something about Milton's Theodicy. Maybe one or two of you are able to enjoy that when you were right. Somebody asks you, what are you working on? Oh, it's just a paper on Milton's Theodicy. You're able to throw away the term now so cavalierly. Oh, it's just a paper on Milton's Theodicy. I'm sorry, what did you just say? Oh, it's just on, Milton's Paradise Lost, the theodictic enterprise. I'm evaluating, I'm critiquing it. I'm sorry, what? And we kind of like, we like to kind of do this thing, where, I know something you don't know, kind of thing. The Thrasymachon argument at the end of Book 1 of Republic is a classic example. And you like to throw that out to just watch people kind of squirm as they go, okay, you talking about something, I got no idea what. And we can kind of feel great about ourselves. What I would say about this is what Bacon says. The advantage of having knowledge, skill sets, is that you can use it at the right time. You don't use it all the time. You use it at the right time, because one of the greatest dangers is intellectual conceit. That is to say, you start to think of yourself as somehow better than other people. I hate to share this story, Mr. Batson, but I will. When I was young and, of course, full of my intellectual self, my parents made me get a normal job on a construction site just to prove I could do real work, you see. So off I go to this construction site. I was a senior in high school, ready to go away to college my summer before, and I'm stuck with this gross guy. He's got this long beard. We're out in West Texas, and he does this thing. And he spits all down all that, right? His tobacco, and but he's a really good cabinet maker, and so he makes these cabinets, and so I get stuck helping him. Go get this, go get that. And, we've been working together for several weeks, and we haven't spoken much. He's kind of a quiet guy. He just tells me what to do, and I do it. And at some point, he notices that during my breaks, I'm reading and this kind of thing. And he said, oh, you're reading? What? Oh, I like to read. Are you going to college? Yes, I'm going. Well, what are your interests? Oh, I'm interested in philosophy. Oh, really? He's trying to be nice. Oh, really? Well, yeah. Who is your favorite philosopher? And now I'm getting kind of like, really? I don't want to have this conversation with you, dude. Just go ahead and spit somewhere else. And but I decide, okay, I'll share. Well, I said, one of my favorite philosophers is Friedrich Nietzsche, the great German philosopher, and now I figure I've kind of killed him off, and he'll be done. And he goes, oh yeah, Nietzsche, I love Nietzsche. He said, I get to lecture for Baylor University every year, a seminar on Nietzsche. That's the look I had. The stupidity of youth. Even now, as I tell this story so many decades later, I'm still embarrassed to share it, and yet I feel like I must. As he looked at me and said, yeah, I just do this job because it pays well and I can get out in the sun and I can meet really nice kids like you. That
guilt trip.
Right, that how? Right? In other words, Bacon, this is pure Bacon. Having the knowledge is great. Having the skill sets, unbelievable. But you've got to know how to modulate, how to be normal, how to move in and out of circles. And this is the reason for the third category. Remember the first one, privateness and retiring, when you're by yourself. The second one, ornament, making yourself look good, sound smart, we sometimes say. What's the third one, Mr. Sherman? What's this thing about ability? Go ahead.
All right. For ability is in the judgment and disposition of business.
Now, I love this because this is one of those things where a lot of times students will say, this schooling stuff, like, dude, what's the whole point anyway? It's kind of a waste of time. Bacon is a guy who goes in a library and can sit for 11 hours and study. But he's also a guy that will say, the number one reason you get skill sets is this. Bank. Money. Now, it will be Bacon who will say in another essay, knowledge is power. No doubt about that. And we've talked about the power of vocabulary, for example, or any number of other kinds of skill sets. I've often said this to my students in this moment, and I will say it to you as well in 303. Here's the deal. Let me throw a challenge down to you. Clearly, you're bright. Clearly, you're developing skill sets. You know about Milton's Theodicy, and you can talk about it now, and most people can't, so hurrah for you. But let me suggest this to you. Look at the next decade of your life, 10 years, and about that say the following. I'm going to outwork everybody else that I'm around. I'm going to work harder. I'm going to work longer. I'm going to work smarter than everybody else. And while everybody else is wasting their money, I'm going to be saving my money. While everybody else is out partying, I'm going to be working. And at the end of my 10 years, I'm going to be rich. I'm going to have a bank. I'm going to have money. Money that I can do with as I wish. But now I'm going to suggest to you, once you get the money and the power, 10 years, work harder than everybody else, then go do something really productive. I mean, you met young Crichton, classic example. The reason he's going for a year to Papua New Guinea is that he paid off all of his Stanford debt in the first 5 years out of Stanford. He worked. I would recommend, for example, all of you taking at least one class in business investment while you're in school. All of the money that you make, learn how to invest it. Instead of dropping it on six-packs, learn how to invest it. Ah, smart. Let somebody else pay for the garbage. You invest your money. So that by the time you graduate, you're already starting to learn how to invest your money. This is pure bacon. Take your skill sets and figure out a way to make a living, but how to make a lot of living. That is to say, gain wealth. And then with that wealth, you can turn around and do things that will improve the world. Dude, what would it have been like if at the age of 7 or 8, your parents had sat down with you and said, okay, we got 30 days. We can go anywhere on the planet we want to go. Where do you want to go? We'll go, we'll live, we'll eat the cuisine, we'll learn some of the language, we'll do all the touring, we'll go everywhere for 30 days. If you had had that as an opportunity from the time you were 7 or 8 until now, every summer, how would you see the world differently than you see the world now? For those of us who've even done a little bit of traveling, we will say, yeah, I'd probably see the world a whole lot differently. Question, you'll probably end up with a 7-year-old someday. By the time you do, if you've got the money, you can do something like this with that 7-year-old. And that 7-year-old will grow up to be a much different person than you, which is a good thing. You want them to do more than you could do. So Bacon says, use your skill sets to make bank. Now notice I've only worked with the first 2 lines of this essay, but Bacon said quite a bit, hasn't he? But there are potential problems with all 3 of these categories. We'll listen to Mr. Sherman continue. Go ahead. To spend too much time, go.
For expert men can execute and perhaps judge the particulars one by one. But the general counsels and the plots and marshalling of affairs come best from those that are learned.
That's a really interesting observation. You can have people who are experts. They know a lot about a little. Bacon will say it's better to know something about a lot. Remember in 8th grade when we used to ask those stupid questions, what am I ever going to need this for? Bacon says that's the whole point of your life. You have no idea when you're going to need it. That's why you learn it. Because you never know when you can call on it, right? You never know. The challenge is always having the confidence to be able to use it. Are you ready for this? IBM told us a few years ago that the hiring department said they decide who they're going to hire in the first 4 seconds of the interview. No kidding. First 4 seconds. What do you mean? The way the kid walks into the room tells us whether we're going to hire him or not. Whoa. And as you develop then your confidence, as you develop your persona, Bacon says, learn as much as you can about as much as you can. Every class that you take at university, consider it some way to learn something. You never know when you're going to call on that information. You never know. It may come back to help you make bank. And you never know. So try to know as much as you can. Now to some of the concerns. Go.
To spend too much time on studies is sloth.
Sloth means laziness. Are you ready for this? He says you can become too much of a bookworm. You can spend too much time studying and not enough time living. Right? So he doesn't argue that you should go to university and hole up in a dorm room or in a library and spend your 4 years doing nothing but studying. Bacon is very much about experience, as he will say in a few lines later. You need all the experiences you can. Don't overdo it with this studying thing in private. What's the next one?
To use them too much for ornament is affection.
Affectation is our word. Look at it on the whiteboard. It's this word right here. You can overdo it, can't you? Right? You can overdo it. You can show off too much And all of a sudden people are like, oh, he thinks or she thinks she's better than the rest of us. You don't want to do that. Don't overdo this ornament thing. Modulate it. Be in control of it. What's the last one?
To make judgment holy by their rules is the humor of a scholar.
Right. That is to say, if you know it and you can use it, you can modulate. That's the word I like to use. You can modulate. You can know when to use it, when not to use it. And that's to your advantage. I love this about Bacon. He's a very practical, pragmatic kind of thinker. He says, you're going to university to gain skill sets, but you don't know what you're going to be when you grow up. I mean, you're going to take a major, but you don't have any idea how that's going to end up. So every bit of experience, use it. Then he makes an interesting observation. Notice what he says at line 10. Crafty men condemn studies. Right? So what are you going to college for? What do you need that crap for when you're on a summer job? What do you need that garbage for? Crafty men, not so smart, they make fun of it. Look what he says next. Crafty men condemn studies. Simple men admire them. Oh gosh, she's so smart. She's so smart. I wish I was smart like her. I'll never be smart like her. She's so much smarter than... Simple men admire studies. But look at the third one. There it is, right? Wise men use them. This is a very utilitarian understanding of learning. Get information that you can use. Later in the essay, he will say it this way. Studies develop into habits. He finishes with a powerful word picture. If you've got a jacked stomach, you go to the doctor, he provides some kind of medicinal protocol to you, right? The same is true for intellectual weakness. One of the most important things you need to do in the next 4 years is to decide where your intellectual weaknesses actually are. Admit them, and then work to fix them. If you are uncomfortable, for example, speaking in front of groups, improve. Because sooner or later, that may be the decider for you of whether you make it or not. If you are uncomfortable doing certain kinds of computations, if you're not a very good speller, whatever it is, decide what are your specific skill sets and then work on them to try to improve yourself so that you can gain money and in so doing gain power. And once you have power, use it wisely. Change the world in a wise way. Once you've got the skill sets and the credentialing, you're able to do this. That's pure Bacon. In other words, it's not getting smart for smart's sake. It's not being intelligent just so you can make people think you're smart or whatever. It's actually using your intelligence in some kind of informed or wise way. Well, there you go. Francis Bacon's Essay of Studies, a classic essay where he challenges us to think differently about the way we think of studying in school. Thank you.